Perfect. Hi everyone, welcome to the third Key Talk. This time I am here with the Executive Director of IWA, Vairavamoorthy. I have to say that I am very excited for this conversation. I've been in the organization for several years now, and having a talk one-on-one with the Executive Director will really put me in touch with the mission of the organization and also with the person that is leading this youth movement. So I hope that you have fun for the next 25 minutes. Thank you, Carla, for joining us. Yes. Wow. What a long way for us to reach here, right? I think I remember the first time that you came to Denmark to talk with the host country committee. Right. And you talked, I thought you brought a lot of the concepts that somehow we need to consider when bringing the exhibition area and building the program, which was the systems of systems talk to let us know the importance of communication across sectors. How do you feel like all of that is brought up into this Congress?
I think the conference has been designed around many of those concepts. If you look at the high level summit that we had, it was a summit that really encouraged partnerships. So you had traditionally the IWA community, which are academics and practitioners, but at the high level summit, it's the first time that we were bringing in ministers and policymakers. And so you had this continuum of decision makers. Usually, you have a couple of the decision makers, and so there's a gap. And so the decision never gets implemented. But here we had that continuum, and that was a big first for IWA. And so the sort of feeling you got from that session was this sense that we're all in this together, and it motivated people to feel that, all of us have the same concerns, all of us have the same aspirations, and I think it really symbolized the importance of partnerships. When you look at other elements of the program, you can see that they're in digital water. You have people talking about a systems perspective from a modeling point of view. When you're looking at the tracks around the circular economy, people are talking about how, say, for example, the urban water sector and the ag sector have to be like, best cousins because there's so many synergies between them. So, and then when you even look at the exhibition, you've got people who are focused much more on the entire water cycle.
Yes.
So I think I'm very pleased with the conference, and I think it has captured all of the sort of ideas that we shared with the host country committee so many years ago.
I completely agree in so many fronts. And I was so impressed today because I was in a technical session in the morning about PFAS and DMS, so removal of emerging contaminants from drinking water. And all of the presentations were made from people collaborating with other partners. So I saw utilities with academia, and then I saw even private sector.
Okay.
Which was really, really interesting.
Which is fantastic. And I think, my observation has been is that COVID changed, the spirit of people, and COVID,
right? Because they also realized that they needed to share the information, to leverage on how to decide and react.
And they realized they all had to be together to try and tackle something. Yes. And so you have seen some competitions, some competitive companies actually now working together, and I think it's epitomized in this conference.
And I should let you know that actually many of those are happening across youth, because what I will give a specific example. So I was working at a company that then was bought by Grundfos. And then I had someone that was working at a company that was partner of the company that I was working for 25 years.
Okay.
So a very strong partner. And then that company was bought by Xylem.
Okay.
Yes. And then we collaborated on a project to produce research on technology.
Yeah.
And for me that was very strong.
Yeah.
And very solid. And for us the problem didn't come up until later. Only later we realized, wait a second. We are actually owned by companies that, have somehow competitive technologies.
yeah.
And then we thought, but the mission is actually I mean, both companies are very strong on also why they're doing this, right?
Yeah.
So, and we had full support, and it's just incredible when I saw the logos in the presentation. It was very strong.
It was strange. It was strong, but yeah.
Very strong. Yes, and the other thing that I noticed, and I think this comes from the progress that is being done, is that some of the presentations were like showing the lab tests and the bench test, and then the full scale.
Yeah.
And they were always saying, and you see the results are the same.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because we've been much better at doing this transition. So, for example, the researchers, they realized that that they should use groundwater if they are going to test groundwater instead of trying to create their own water. Yes.
Yeah.
So they are much more sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And then when you go to full scale, I think the water utilities are much better understanding that they have to tweak some things a little bit to make sure that, that suddenly you don't start a process just because, it requires like a backwash or whatever. So you respect that it requires some structure to execute the test, right?
Yeah.
So, and I feel that is then the leap to talk about entrepreneurship. Sure. That is something that we've been talking so much during the Congress as well.
Okay.
I was just now in the Innovate, I just passed by and I asked the person, can you please give me a summary of what happened here? Yeah. But it was on the Innovators Forum, the Innovation Forum, and it was really nice also. Like you would see the drawings and the words that we're talking about now being drawn into a solution.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so they are looking at what will the world of water look in 2050.
Yeah.
And from there, they are just drawing the solution. And you see a lot, not only with, for example, decentralization of drinking water production, not only with Power-to-X, but also with apps for citizen services.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a very global approach to water.
Yeah.
Right? So and so I'm so happy about that. Yeah. Have you had the chance to go to places? I mean, you've been going around. You were at the High Level Summit.
I attended the end of the High Level Summit. I couldn't attend the whole thing. And I've been able to go to a couple of sessions, but usually just to say some welcome words, because I'm going to a lot. But the two things that I've observed, and it's really consistent with what you said, it's this sense that now, particularly for the researchers, because IWA has about 60% academic members, that they're under a lot of pressure now to demonstrate impact. And so they've had to make a move from their sort of comfort zone, which is fundamental research, into much more sort of applied research. And sort of supporting that is you've got companies who have historically been sort of nuts and bolts type companies who realize they need innovation in order to make the transition. So they have also created strong, strong staff. They have staff who are sort of, they have a research focus. Right. And so we have now a community of applied researchers who have 1 foot in academia and 1 foot in practice. Mm-hmm. And you have people coming from companies who have 1 foot in the company and 1 foot in academia. So we're able to bridge the chasm that used to be there between research and practice. Right. And so I think an organization like IWA is very much a champion of trying to accelerate, as you were saying, accelerate ideas going from a laboratory to, say, a pilot to up full-scale deployment. So that's one thing that I've observed, just like you here. And the other thing is this idea of open innovation. Yeah. There are a lot of companies who have done a bit of innovation and developed patents, but they didn't really take it any further. And so it sort of sits in a drawer in that company. But now you're seeing the creation of an environment where people are willing to sort of share patents, which they themselves might not have been able to exploit, but that may be useful for others, And so you sort of see this ecosystem of companies willing to share little pieces of solutions that, when combined, can really solve the problems that we need. And so that's another thing that I've observed.
But I feel it matches perfectly what I've been feeling as well. We are running, so this program has 2 different programs. Yeah. One that is called The Buzz, and that is where we put 5 young water professionals just talking about what did you see today, what it was, what are you feeling, and then another that is one-on-one. And when I had Professor Ramir, he told me a lot about capacity building. Yeah. And so capacity building and a lot of wash projects also in corporation. And then with Pia Haske from Safe Water with Grundfos, they were also she was talking about the business that she's creating to support. So basically, she had to write a business proposal.
Yeah.
And convince a bunch of management people that there is a viable business in approaching emerging markets.
Yeah.
And invest in capacity building activities,
Yeah.
right? And that is just for me incredible. And I was like, how did you dare to do that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what took you to go from like that idea to actually propose to management? And she was, yeah, but I just needed to do it. I couldn't just stand on that idea, right?
Yeah,
I needed to do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what you gain a lot from this conference, is just you gain the confidence
Yeah,
to
yeah.
go forward on those ideas that maybe are too bold right now, but it makes complete sense.
Yeah, and I think we have to be bold, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're facing a crisis, not just climate change, but urbanization, which means that the old way in which we do water is no longer really sustainable. You know, I always say we have well-functioning systems, but they're not actually sustainable, you know, and we need to sort of change that paradigm. And I think, you know, I also had a chat with the people at Grundfos and this sort of stuff that they're doing. I think that the emerging markets, the global south, is really on the cusp of large investments, particularly in the area of wastewater. And the question that they're asking themselves, you know, do they follow the 19th century approaches that the West employed, or do they look to do something a little bit more innovative and a little bit more sustainable? And so there's this sort of small window of opportunity for them to be very creative and really design systems that maybe the Western world learns from, you know, because they don't have to transition their building from scratch, so they can build these innovative systems from scratch. And I think this conference has, you know, exposed those opportunities that exist in the emerging economies, in the global south, and I think it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and it brings us more aware because, you know, when I spend most of my time in Europe, it's difficult for me to understand what are the possible opportunities or windows of opportunities.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking with the rest of my fellows here, then I'm more aware of the challenge, and because it's told to me face to face. And it just brings so much more room for us to express and develop the ideas together. Yeah, I was, because I really don't know much about you, Carla. I every time that you talk, I've been reading what you write every time on the source, and
how do you enjoy them, or
yes,
are they okay?
yes. Some of them I heard, but it's nice to have a reference. So then, when I'm trying to explain it to someone, I can refer to. That's really important. But what is this passion? Where did it came from? And what is your experience with water?
So I come from a family of water professionals. So my father was a water person. But really what inspired me was when I was at university, and I studied civil engineering in London, right, at King's. And it was a lecturer in my second year of study who had worked on the International Drinking Water Decade work. And when I heard about the challenge of trying to provide people with water supply and sanitation, and the type of work that goes on, it really fascinated me, you know, the challenges that people face in the developing world and the need for solutions for the developing world. So that then, you know, pushed me to do a master's in public health engineering.
So how old were you back then?
So this was when I was like 19, 20.
But you were already that aware?
Yeah, because I come from a developing country, my background.
No, but also from
from my father being in water, and
exactly.
You know, he was working in irrigation and these sorts of things back home, and then he had become a hydrologist in the UK. And so then I decided to do a master's, which had a strong development focus at Imperial. And then after my master's, I continued to do a PhD. And my PhD was on water scarcity in developing countries. So I looked at the modeling of intermittent water supply systems, which is still a big problem in Asia and Africa. and I looked at the problems of inequity in the supply of water, where you find that, you know, poorer people get very little water from these systems, and richer people are able to get much, much more water. So my PhD was on that. And then immediately after that, I fell in love with India, and I met my wife there, and, you know, that's another story. But then I was very much interested in this whole area of intermittent water supply. And I then I became an academic. I got a lectureship position when I was about 25, 26.
That was also very, very young.
I went straight from PhD into academia, you know, so I didn't do a postdoc. I just went straight into lecturing. And then I got a grant, a good research grant, to look at the same stuff that I'd done in my PhD on intermittent water supply. And so we did a project based out in India and Uganda.
Yes.
And we built these modeling tools to sort of try and understand. So then I was able to build a research team. And then we really became, you know, quite a strong group looking at all the problems of drinking water in water scarce scenarios. So we were looking at the contamination of water, because when the pipes are empty for a few hours of the day, you get ingress of contaminants. And then we looked at this inequity in the supply of water. And we continued doing quite a lot of research projects in India and Uganda on this. And
so collaborating with other universities?
Collaborating with lots of other universities, collaborating with utilities. So we worked very closely with utilities.
Already at that time?
Yeah, because it was, you know, that's where the data was. That's where that you would really, I mean, what I learned in that process, because I was based out in the UK, but what I learned in that process was the people on the ground know much more than you do.
Yes.
And, you know, they've already thought about lots of solutions. And so my role was really to understand the problems in the way they articulated it, and then ask them how they had thought about solving it, and then just providing some of the research to, I mean, it was almost that they were defining how to solve the problem, and I was just then able to get my researchers to start developing it. So we did quite well in that respect, and we, you know, so I was a sort of a hydraulic modeler. That was my background. And then, you know, I became the director of a very large European project called Switch, which was, you know, the largest water project funded by the European Union at the time. And that was 12 countries, 40 PhDs on that project. And that was looking at the whole urban water cycle. So I shifted then from drinking water to looking at integrated urban water management.
And that's where you start to understand the system of cities.
Exactly. Yeah, that's when you realize you're dealing with a system of systems. And that project also taught me a big thing, and I was talking to one of the participants today, the importance of social sciences.
Yes.
And, you know, that project, what made that project quite famous was that it wasn't really about the technical research we were doing. The project was all anchored around how do you maximize the uptake of the outcomes, right? Yes. And the European Union's position and the position of this project was that we have a lot of solutions, but they are never implemented. And so what this project did was that it was centered around this concept called learning alliances. And this is where we created these stakeholder platforms, these multi-stakeholder platforms in 12 cities around the world, and they were on every continent. And that we would bring all these different stakeholders and then use some very simple tools to share with them, you know, what their current state is, what the future is likely to bring to their city, and then allow them to prioritize the interventions. And then those interventions would be what we would do the research on. So it was very much a demand-driven project, and it became famous for that sort of element.
Yes.
And that element was really run by the social scientists, and there was an organization which is still around, and that was the guy I was talking to earlier today, called the IRC, based out in the Netherlands. They were, if you like, the architects of this principle of learning alliances. And so the project, although it had a lot of, you know, techie people, you know, and a lot of professors who were techie people, it got dominated by this sort of community of practitioners who were
They were the input, right?
They were, if you like, they became the voice of the project. It, you know, the balance shifted. Initially, it started with quite a technical project, and professors just wanting to do their research, and you know, the cities were just like case studies for them. It shifted to the whole project could only do research if the cities wanted it. And we had some very successful cities like Belo Horizonte in Brazil. We had Accra in Ghana. Hamburg was also very successful. We had Zaragoza, Spain, Tel Aviv, where they had already been very advanced in terms of the way they manage water. So this project was also very interesting because it was diverse in terms of the country.
What time is that? What year are we talking about?
So I finished that project, so I've been at IWA for 5 years. And then at EME2.
Because you're talking about
so probably around 15 years ago.
Yeah, because you're talking about topics that we still talk today,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
this user-driven research and all of that. But when people are saying, yeah, we've talked about that before, and we said that before, and we are already there are already mechanisms.
No.
Yeah, but people now are different.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the difference,
Yeah.
right? It's true. We still, in some cases, have structures that we have created before, you know. But the people are different, so maybe they're more open to do that now.
Yeah,
And so I think that's a major shift.
I think so, but I'm a little bit more pessimistic than you, you know. And I think the problem is the water sector, you know, please, I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, is that we always sort of over-congratulate ourselves, you know, and we're always talking to ourselves. And we're always exaggerating a little bit our influence, you know. Wow. And I feel that we need a little bit more humility in terms of, you know, the work that we do. So, you know, as I was listening to you, I remember being on a panel, not, you know, maybe 5 years ago, and a PhD student asked this question. And I remember to myself, I asked that exact question when I was a student, right? And I asked it with the same degree of frustration as this individual was asking. And I felt nothing changed, you know. And then the response from the panelist was exactly the same response that I had received from a panelist, right, 30 years earlier. And it was like, we need to work together. It's all about partnerships and collaboration. We have to view things through one lens. And, you know, there's institutional fragmentation and all this. So we still hear these same slogans and these same statements being made. And so I do feel, particularly the young, I think they are different. And I think that they have to talk about the elephants in the room, you know, and not sort of avoid talking about these things. And we have to be much more action-oriented. I mean, I also had a little bit of a period in the UN type system, you know, and I was a UNESCO professor in Delft. And I think, you know, again, the UN sometimes can present a lot of this stuff in quite a superficial way. And it's really the practitioners, right, you know, who get the problem. And it's also understanding that the people in the global south, they know what's wrong, right? And they have solutions. And we just need to empower them to develop those solutions and deliver them. And I think that we are slowly moving because of, you know, information technology and these facilities for those people in the global south to now have access to a lot more information and to articulate their ideas much more and become influencers, you know. If you take IWA, and I don't want to digress, but if you take IWA was very much, you know,
It has changed a lot.
It's changed a lot, and it was an institution where, it's an association where you had to travel to be seen, right? So you would, you know, the people who hold their hands up at a conference or sit at the right dinners, they're the people that you see who progress within the association. Now we're seeing, because of the social media, we're seeing people who can never afford to travel are able to communicate their ideas and are able to get a following and to become influencers. And they can now have prominent positions within the association. So we've become a much more egalitarian association, but it's because of those tools, you know. And so I think some of these solutions that we're looking at for solving problems on the ground, it's coming through that ability for people to communicate through this medium of information technology. And even the fact that IWA has now made all their journals open access. We're just about to launch our content management system, which has huge amounts of information that people can use. I think that's really the big change, you know. The knowledge is no longer monopolized by a certain group.
No, and there's so
much
many
more democratized.
on exchange of knowledge. I have two notes on that because, for example, now with the open access, I work in the private sector. So I moved from academia to the private sector. And suddenly now I have access to the journals. And that allows me to change the way that I have, the speed at which I have access to information. And to speed that up, I actually created a software to help the company dimension our products. And then I can, because I just read that in an article, and of course I do my due diligences and I take a look at several sources, but then I can implement the changes on the code, and then they can already have something. And then they call me and say, what happened?
Yeah.
And then I explain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that knowledge exchange, because if I try to explain each one individually without their being awake to listen, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But then I wait until they come to a case where that has to happen. And then I say, okay, then now that you're interested, let me explain you why.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. The second thing that I want to say is that I wanted to bring some positivity.
Yeah.
I know that you're being, and I think it's because I'm talking with so many young water professionals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe on the layer that you're at and the access that you're having, that's the feeling, that frustration, and maybe the way that you're seeing the sector can look a bit negative. But I was in the stand of my company, and at some point, one kid, a girl from India, came and talked to me, and she said, Inês, can you explain me? She told me for first name. She just read. Inês, can you explain me how do you choose the sand?
How do you choose
the sand for this filter?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, oh, it depends on what you want to remove. She was like, oh, it's only particles. I said, okay, then it depends on the size of the particles. And she was like, yeah, okay. And if you don't know, what do you do? And I said, okay, then I will start with this one, then I'll move to this one, and then I'll move to this one because of pressure. And yeah, because I have here something that I want to show you. She opened the phone, she showed me a photo of like a tube with sand inside, a filtration system, a small filtration system. And I'm like, what is that? She's like, oh, this is a prototype. And I said, what do you mean a prototype? And she's like, yeah, this is the 5th one. I sold the first 4. I said, okay, what is this? And so she's part of one of the teams that won from the Next Generation Water Action.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's a team from India. I think they're 4, the team of 4, 1 girl and 3 young guys. And I had a chance to meet them. And they are developing the system that captures rainwater, and then it grabs filters, all the suspended solids or the particles, and then the population can use it, or the communities can use it for irrigation. So that's the idea. At a later stage, also for non-potable water, let's say. And so I had one of my technical guys. They brought the product here, and I brought one of my technical guys. I said, please go there and check, because they had sensors and all of that they are trying to integrate. And then I met the rest of the team. I said, who is the brain? And they pointed to one of the guys and said, who is the technical guy? And they pointed to the other guy. And I said, then why was the girl talking to me? Right? Yeah. And so this is happening. Yeah. This is happening. And they told me that after this talk that I have with you, they wanted me to go to see their presentation, so I'll make sure to pass by after. But it's real, it's tangible. Yeah. They were able to come to the Congress. They approached someone that they could leverage the knowledge, and they brought the product. They had someone looking at it, and this is happening. Yeah. So I actually am slightly more positive.
No, I'm positive, but I think that I'm very positive because I see a lot of innovation taking place in the water sector. I see us sort of really now realizing we have to transition, right? Yeah. But I think that the challenges we face in the global south, in the West, we can afford to take some time, right? Yeah. Because as I said, our systems are functioning okay, and they'll slowly over time. But in the global south, I feel that we've talked about sanitation for a long time. We've talked about the lack of sanitation for a long time. The numbers never change, right? The number of people without access to this, access to that. And so the frustration comes from moving from rhetoric to very tangible things, right? And delivering those solutions. So, for example, in the area of sanitation, I'm very inspired by the work that's being done on non-sewage sanitation, something that 10 years ago would have never even been considered by decision makers in the Global South and even donors, right? But now, we've got some really beautiful, elegant solutions that primarily are coming from researchers in the Global South that I think are influencing even deployment of non-sewage sanitation in the US, for example. Yes. But it's been a hard journey, right? And it's not been as fast as it should have been, and it could have been. And I think that, there's a lot of rhetoric without the thing being done. Intermittent water supply. I did my PhD in 1993, right? I got my PhD in 93, 94. India still has almost every city in the country has intermittent water supply, right? In Africa, many of the cities have intermittent water supply. These systems, provide, really disproportionate amounts of water to the rich against the poor. These systems also create pollution or encourage pollution. Why do we still have those systems? We know how to fix it. And so my frustration is more looking at the situation in the Global South and the fact that we haven't moved as far as we should have,
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, we will have to end, so I have to
Sure.
stop. Yes,
yeah, no worries.
But I would actually recommend. I don't know if you had a chance to see the movie Into the Dust.
Yep. Actually.
Yes, and I think that for those that are listening to us and want to have an idea of the experience that the Global South faces, it's a good way.
I actually provided a bit of an interview for that. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I haven't heard that, but yes, I believe it was a good movie, and it put things a little bit into perspective. Yeah. But thank you so much for
really
passing
enjoyed
by.
it.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'll see you later tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
You take care.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.